What's up my bro, Tundrum here, back with another video, and today I'm going to be showing you my Pioneer Spirits deck. Now, I sort of own this deck in real life. I mix it between this version and an Azorius blue-white version. However, I thought instead of re-sleeving, getting the deck all set up in real life, I thought I'd just have it here ready to go, just using this online list so we can look for it quicker and analyze cards quicker. So, without further ado, let's get into this list. So this deck is very competitive. It all blows away most other decks it plays against. Even competitive decks, it's a competitive deck in Pioneer. You build this, you're going to have success. So, we'll get into it. So, this deck, you kind of want to, it's very aggressive spirits based deck that goes in really quick early game, uses disruption to shut down the opponent, and just absolutely speed runs out the opponent's life total, along with a lot of interaction and destruction. So, first up we have Mausoleum Wanderer, a beast in any spirit deck. It's a 1 mana 1/1 flying that gets +1/+1 whenever another spirit enters the battlefield under your control. That on its own would already be really powerful, but we can also sacrifice it to counter target instant or sorcery spell unless its controller pays X, where X is Mausoleum Wanderer's power. So this is incredibly strong. It will very often have more than one power, and your opponent can never safely play an instant or sorcery spell while this is on the field, because you could try and counter it, and even if they leave the mana up, who knows, you could make it bigger and counter it anyway. So it's an incredibly good aggressive card early game, and can counter their stuff. Always run 4 Mausoleum Wanderers. Then we have 4 Spectral Sailors. This one isn't as essential, but once again it is quite useful. So it's a 1 mana 1/1 with flash and flying, and we can pay 4 to draw a card. So that flash on there is really handy. It can help us interact with things like Mausoleum Wanderer, for example, we showed before, instant speed, flash it in at the end of the opponent's turn. It's also a nice, really good early game aggressor, and late game we can keep pumping out cards into our hand if we run out of other things to do. So it's a nicely versatile card. Next up we have probably my second favourite card in the deck after Mausoleum Wanderer, Rattlechains. Rattlechains is a 2 mana 2/1 with flash and flying. That on its own, once again, really solid. The flash is so useful, but it has not one, but 2 incredibly strong keywords that come on it. It has, when it enters the battlefield, target spirit gains hexproof until end of turn. So they try to remove any of your spirits, flash and Rattlechains, boom. You've just countered their removal spell essentially, which is incredibly strong. Even just this on its own, we'd probably still be running a couple of them, but there's more. You may cast spirit spells as though they had flash, so this lets all your stuff be cast at instant speed, so you can just, your opponent has no idea what you could do. You could flash in everything on their turn and they can never do anything safely. This is an incredibly powerful card and I would highly recommend running 4 of it. We then have 4 Shacklegeist. It's a 2 mana 2/2 with flying, however it can only block creatures with flying. It does have a very solid keyword though. It lets you tap 2 untapped spirits you control to tap target creature you don't control. So you can be flashing in these cards on the opponent's turn with things like Rattlechains and Spectral Sailor, and then tapping their things down, slowing them down completely. This can let you really utilise the cards you've just played to defend off the opponent's attacking cards. Really lets you choose your stuff to essentially block theirs while still flying over with your flyers, chipping them down. It doesn't seem that good on the surface, but trust me, once you get this into play, it's very solid and is a very nice defensive card against those other aggressive decks. And a 2 mana 2/2 flying is not a bad rate at all. We're then running 3 Spectral Adversary. I don't see many other people run this, but boy, I love it. It's a 2 mana 2/1 with flash and flying. That on its own, that's Rattlechain stats. That is not bad at all, flashing in the 2/1 flyer on the end of their turn. However, it has a big upside. When it enters the battlefield, you may pay 2 mana any number of times. When you do, put that many 1/1 counters on Spectral Adversary, and then that many other target artifact, creatures, or enchantments phase out. So this is really solid. If you have more mana, you can, number one, play it as a bigger creature, so it's more aggressive later in the game, and you can phase stuff out. So this can be whether you're phasing the opponent's stuff out, so they can't block, finishing over for lethal damage, phasing out the things the opponents are attacking you with, phasing out things the opponents are attacking you with, which is really solid. This can stop big threats attacking you on the board, and you can also use it to phase out your creatures if they're under threat from things like removal spells. So this is an extra layer of protection and can be very powerful late game, as well as a nice wee early game aggressor. We're then running 4 Supreme Phantom, just a really powerful card, a 2 mana 1/3, but it gives all our other spirits 1/1, which in this case is all our other creatures. So this is really solid. It just makes all our little creatures we've played become big threats. You drop this on turn 3 and suddenly you have a heap of power on board. This is an absolute bomb and a must run. Then finally, our last creature is 1 Cemetery Illuminator. So this is a 3 mana 2/3 with flying, but when it enters the battlefield or attacks, exile a card from our graveyard. We may look at the top card of our library any time. And once each turn, we may cast a spell from the top of our library if it shares a card type with a card exiled with Cemetery Illuminator. So, it's not too powerful, but it's a nice top-end creature that if it's got into the late game, we can play this and just keep spewing out creatures. We're very likely by turn 3 to have at least one of our smaller creatures probably have been killed off by this point anyway, or cast one of our many spells. So this lets us get some more card advantage, get heaps more cards into play. It also lets us see what we have coming next, even if we can't play anything with it. And a 2/3 flying body is pretty big. So this is quite the solid card. On to our spells. So our spells, we have 3 Essence Flux. Now I see a lot of people running Slip Out the Back in similar decks, but honestly, I just prefer Essence Flux. Reasons. So, exile target creature you control, then return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control. If it's spirit, put a +1/+1 counter on it. Yes, this doesn't work against board wipes like Slip Out the Back would. However, what this lets you do is you can get the Enter the Battlefield effect immediately off it. So you flicker it, then it comes back. So if we want to make our Mausoleum Wanderers bigger, the flicker will make it bigger. If we want to protect our Supreme Phantom, but still want that buff on the field, flicker it and we'll still get that buff. It also lets us trigger things like Spectral Adversary instantly. So let's say we have the Essence Flux, we flicker the Spectral Adversary, pay the cost again, phase things out. Overall, or if we want to tap something down with Shacklegeist, flicker it, comes back instantly untapped, and we can do the ability. So Slip Out the Back, which we are running in our sideboard as well, a lot of people will run this instead. And Slip Out the Back, yes, it protects against board wipes. However, I think the extra versatility of Essence Flux is so much more powerful that I think it is worth it. So we're running 3 Essence Flux, very strong card. We then have 4 Lofty Denial. Counter target spell unless its controller pays 1. But if we control a creature with flying, which is all our creatures, counter it unless they pay 4 instead. This is just really nice interaction, can shut down those massive threats, and they can't really do much about it. We then have 4 Geistlight Snare. This is counter target spell unless its controller pays 3, costs 3 mana. However, if we control a spirit, it costs 2, and if we control an enchantment, it costs 1. Well, if it's just an enchantment, it'll be 1. But we're guaranteed to have an enchantment, it'll cost 1. So this is normally a 2 or even 1 mana counter spell that counters unless its controller pays 3, which is just really nice versatility. And finally, our last non-land card, 4 Curious Obsession. Enchant a creature, it gets 1/1, and has whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, you may draw a card. However, at your end step, if you didn't attack, you must sacrifice it. So, all our creatures are flying. We're almost always going to be affording to attack with at least 1 creature. This gets us additional damage in, and just draws us a heap of cards, fueling our hand to pump out those cheaper cards. Things like Supreme Phantoms, Mausoleum Wanderers, Spectral Sailors. It just lets us absolutely power through that early game. It's such a strong card, and I do recommend running it. If you don't attack, you aren't attacking, you're probably losing anyway, so that's not even that big of a downside. So it's just such a strong aggressive card that keeps fueling us with energy to keep attacking. Now, and obviously it also has the interaction with the Geistlight Snare. So that is once again a really solid interaction there, because it can make Geistlight Snare cost as little as 1 mana to counter their thing, which is an insane trade. Now we're onto our lands. So, running 2 Castle Ventress can just give us a little bit of late game versatility. Solid wee upgraded version of an island in my opinion. 1 Crawling Barrens. Now this one, it's a bit skeptical because it is a colourless and we do often need our blues. However, I do really like it. It's just a nice little creature that we can turn into a big threat late game, keep making it bigger and bigger every turn, and it ensures we never run out of things to do in the case of we get board wiped. Because as I said, what I like about this deck is it swarms out, I know it's my early game, but between things like Spectral Sailor, Cemetery Illuminator, Curious Obsession, Castle Ventress, Crawling Barrens, it makes sure we always have things to do, even if it's the opponents manage to control it into a slow late game. So there we have our 1 Crawling Barrens. We then have 1 Hall of the Storm Giant. So this will enter tapped if we have 2 or more other lands, but generally that doesn't actually matter. We'll normally only care about that early game, so it'll normally enter untapped, and we can pay 6 mana to turn it into a massive 7/7. So once again, that's another thing we can do again late game to swarm over if we've run out of energy. We then have 16 islands and 1 Otarua, the Soaring City. It just enters untapped and taps for blue, so there's absolutely nothing bad about it in that aspect, except it is a non-basic, but that doesn't really matter. And then we can also channel it for 4 mana to return target artifact, creature, enchantment, or planeswalker to its owner's hand, and that also costs 1 less to activate for every legendary creature we control. Sadly, we have none, but it is still a little bit of extra versatility there, just having that ability to do late game. Finally, the sideboard. 1 Essence Flux. This is a bit more so we can throw in a 4th one if necessary. 3 Slip Out the Backs. Already stated this one. Pretty much like an Essence Flux, just slightly worse in my opinion. However, if the opponent is running a deck where they have heaps of board wipes, you can obviously swap these in for your current Essence Fluxes if needed. We then have 2 Ether Gust, little bit of power against red or green decks. 2 Cerulean Drakes, solid against burn decks. It's a flyer too, so it helps with our deck. It's just really good to slow down those burn decks coming at you. We then have 2 Disdainful Strokes for decks that have almost only bigger creatures or bigger spells. 2 Brazen Borrowers. This is just a nice all-rounder. It's a 3/1 flash flying, and it can also return things to its owner's hand earlier on. A lot of people do run this in the main deck. However, because it's not a spirit, I'm not the most massive fan of it in this deck. Just more of a sideboard card for when you really need that extra value. And then finally, we have more counter spells. 3 Mystical Disputes. Insane against other blue decks. For example, if we come up against another blue spirits deck or a blue control deck, this is very strong. So definitely running those there. And the best thing about all this deck is, as I said, quite competitive. It only costs currently what MTG Goldfish is, it's $140 to make. So that's absolutely cheap as. Take out the 2 Brazen Borrowers and the Otaru, however you say that, and those aren't even very essential cards. It's under $100 to get this competitive list. So I would highly recommend, if you're keen, to jump on this list now, because it has done some work for me. But anyway, that's my competitive Pioneer Spirits deck tech. I really hope you enjoyed this one and liked the deck. If you like this style where I just kind of go over everything, show you guys everything at once, and have the deck list ready to send to you if needed, let me know. Or if you just prefer the normal style where I just go through the cards one at a time on the screen, also let me know. But that's my video. Hope you enjoyed. If you did, I would really appreciate it if you leave a like and subscribe to the channel to help me pump out more content like this. But outside of that, I'll see you on the next one.